So let's continue with graphing sinusoidal functions. And then we're going to go the opposite way, where you're given the graph and you have to come up with the function. So far, what we've done is you've been given the function and maybe out values for a, b, h, and or k. You've been given whether it's sine or cos, and then you've been asked to graph it. So just as a quick review, when we're given a sine function or a cosine function, how do we figure out what the period is?
If there's anything.
Ooh.
It's one of the letters.
No, it's not a.
B.
Pi over b.
Yeah, that's right. I got it.
The amplitude, that's a absolute value. The midline, k. The minimum, how do I find what the minimum is? Don't I take the midline minus the amplitude?
Yeah.
And then for the max line, I take the midline plus the amplitude. And then the horizontal shift, h. Okay. So we're gonna graph one more, but this one you have to be a little careful with, because you're not just asked to sketch the graph, you're asked to sketch the graph between 0 and 6 on the x-axis. When it says the domain of 0 to 6, that means we're only graphing a portion of it. Okay? So you gotta make sure you carefully read questions when you're asked to graph. Most of the time you'll be asked sketch at least one period of, and then you'll be given the function. But sometimes you may be asked sketch this graph, but only that section. Okay, which we'll deal with at the end. Okay, so let's start this up. I always like to, I don't know why, I always like to do, and I didn't do it, I should have done it in the order from the beginning. I always like to do K, A, B, and H. That's how I like to set it up. Because remember, K is the midline. So what's the midline in this case? 2. So I know that at 2, I'm going to have my midline. You don't necessarily need arrows. A stands for amplitude, which is not 0, it's 1, right? Because if it was 0, that means everything would become 0. It has to be 1. So the amplitude is 1, which means these two pieces of information, I get the max by going 2 plus 1, and I get the min by going 2 minus 1. So the max is going to be 2 plus 1 or 3. So that's where my graph is going to top out. And my min is going to be 1, where my graph is going to bottom out. Period. Well, we use B to find the period. So the period is going to be 2 pi over B, well, over absolute value of B, which is 2 pi over pi over 2. Well, let's change this to a multiplication. 2 pi is the same as 2 pi over 1 times 2 over pi, so the pi's cancel. And the period's going to be 4. Okay? So 4 notches. And the fourth one is going to be 4, which means we could find the value of every notch. While the first notch is going to be 4 divided by 4, which is 1, 2, and then 3, because it goes up by ones. So in this case, the value of one notch is 1. We're also going to have a shift. How? 1 unit. Now, this is where you've got to be careful. 1 unit right does not mean does not necessarily mean 1 notch right. It does in this case. But what happens if this was 2, 4, 6, 8? Well, 1 notch would actually have a value of 2, wouldn't it? So you got to be careful with that. Don't always assume a notch has a value of 1. It could be pi. It could be pi over 2. It could be pi over 4. It could be a half. There's a whole bunch of different numbers it could be. You get that from the period. Okay, so we know we're going to graph a cosine in here, and then we're going to have to shift it 1 unit right, which happens to be the same as 1 notch right in this case. So I know I'm going to go 1 notch to the right. But first off, I'm going to graph it without the shift. Okay? So I'm going to start on the y-axis. It's cos. Where do I start? Up top, right? 3. Then I go to middle, minimum, middle, maximum. But I now have to shift it right 1. So everything gets moved to the right 1. So this goes here, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. And then it looks like this. Now, notice I haven't put the arrows on it yet, because I have to graph from 0 to 6. So the purple one that I've graphed has to start at 0. Where would it be at 0? Where would a dot be if we're going backwards? At the midline, right? So it starts there. Notice I don't put an arrow after it because I'm asked to start at 0. Then I've got to go 5 and then even another notch 6. Well, I'm up to 5 right now. Where would I go when I'm at 6? To the mid, right? And I put a dot there, not an arrow, because I'm asked to stop at 6. So that's one thing you've got to be careful with when you're graphing sinusoidal functions. Like I said, most of the time, you'll be asked to sketch at least 1 period. Sometimes you may be restricted in what you graph, which means we don't put arrows on the end. Okay? All right, so that is going when you're given the function and you're asked to graph it. Now let's go backwards. And I'm not going to do example 2. We don't have to worry about example 2. In fact, I'm going to skip a few examples in this one. I'm only going to focus on what's important. Okay. So, I need myself a little note here. What I have to remember how to do. Yeah. To find an equation or a sinusoidal function. Well, we're going to have to find values of A, B, H, and K. Find in this order. I always like this order. Get the midline first, get the amplitude, okay? Because if you got the midline, you've got K. If you got the amplitude, you've got A. We have to figure out what B is, and we have to see if there was a shift and how much. So I always call it cabbage. Cab H, you know? Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm here all week. Don't forget to tip your waiter or waitress. So we're asked to write a cosine function for this one. So we need to find the values of K, A, B, and H. K is equal to the midline. What would be the midline in this case? 0, right? Now you can kind of see that by looking from the graph. It's 1 above, 1 below, so it's got to be at 0. Another way you can find the midline, always, do the max plus the min divide 2. This one's pretty easy to find the midline. Sometimes they're not so easy. So to find the midline, you can always do max plus min divide 2. So it's 0. Okay, so I've got K, that's nothing. A is the amplitude. Now that I've got the midline, I can figure out the amplitude, which would be 1. So notice we're halfway there now. Okay, we need to find K, A, B, and H. We've already found the first 2. How do I find B? Well, think of it this way. And I'm going to do this over here. Remember when we were graphing them, the period equals 2 pi divided b, yes? Okay. Well, using algebra, I'm going to multiply both sides by the absolute value of b. So I'm going to get b times the period is equal to 2 pi. How would I find b? Divide the period. Divide the period. So that's how we find, if you're finding the period, it's 2, you know b, and you do 2 pi divide b. If you're trying to find b, you must know the period, which means you got to do 2 pi divide the period. So to find this, I got to do 2 pi divided by the period. But I've got to look at my graph and figure out what is the period. Remember, we're asked to write a cosine function. Where do you see a cosine function starting and ending? Where do you see it starting? Here, right? Because doesn't it start up top? And it ends here. Right? And how many notches does it take to complete a cycle? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, How much is one notch? Well, if 2 notches is pi, doesn't 1 notch mean it's pi over 2? So that means it's 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, which is the same as 2 pi. So the cos period is 2 pi, which means that's what I divide 2 pi by. And I get 1. Cosine normally starts here, right? On the y-axis, but it didn't start, it started 1 notch to the left. That means there's a shift. How much did it shift? How much is 1 notch? Pi over 2, and we went to the left, so it's negative. Now you put those all together to get your equation. So it would be y equals a. Now I'm going to write these, but I'll show you after we don't have to write some of these things. 1 times cos, open bracket, then b, open parentheses, x minus h, which means it becomes plus pi over 2, close parenthesis, close bracket, k was 0, right? But I don't have to write these things, do I? I don't have to write the ones, and zeros. So the simplified answer would be just cos x plus pi over 2. And that's your equation for that sinusoidal function. Okay? So all I want to do is go through a few more of these. And you just, if you follow the same system or steps, it gets pretty straightforward. Here we're given one, we're asked to write a sine function. Well, k, which is the midline, right? What's the midline? It's 0 again. Or we could have done the max plus the min, divide 2, which gives us 0. So k is 0. Amplitude, A, 4. B is 2 pi divided by the period. So what I got to do is I got to go to the graph and I got to look for a sine cycle. Remember, a sine cycle starts at the midline, right? So would you all agree a sine cycle starts here and ends here? Right? Looks like that. So how many notches does it take to complete a cycle? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many, or what's the value of 1 notch? Well, if 4 notches is 2 pi, wouldn't this be 2 pi divided 4? Which is pi over 2. 1 notch is pi over 2. That's how you find it. You'll always be given the value of the 4th notch. Sometimes you might be given the value of the 2nd, but you're going to have to find the value of 1 notch. And I always find it by just saying, okay, if 4 notches is this, then 1 notch is this divided 4. Always. Never fails. So that means I've got 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi here. So a sine period is 2 pi. So therefore, I've got 2 pi divided 2 pi, which is 1. So I don't have to write anything for k in the equation. I don't have to write anything for b. Remember, a sine cycle without a shift normally starts here, right, at the origin. But this sine cycle starts 2 notches to the left. How much is 2 notches to the left? 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, which is pi. So that means it's shifted to the right pi. Now we're ready to write our equation. Y equals a, well this time there is a value of a besides 1. Sine b is 1, so we don't have to write that. But there is a shift, of x minus pi. And then plus the midline, well the midline is 0 or k is 0, so we're done. I would like you to try this one. It's a little bit different. So pretty straightforward. 1 plus minus 1 over 2 is 0. Amplitude is 1. You need to find where does the sine graph or where does the sine cycle start and finish. Well, you've actually got a couple of choices. Here's where one starts and finishes. Or some of you may have chosen this one. And both are fine. It doesn't matter which one you choose. Okay? Because the period is still going to be the same. What's the period? Well, if 4 notches is pi, 1 notch is pi over 4, so it's 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, which is pi. So B is 2. Here's where some of you guys differ. Some of you, if you use this as your sine cycle, we went back pi over 4. If you used this as your sine cycle, you went ahead 3 pi over 4. Both of these are correct. So we could have an answer that looks like this. Sine 2 x plus pi over 4, like that. Or this one. One is not more correct than the other. There are infinite answers. Actually, you know what I could do? Let's see, I'm going to shift it. I'm going to shift it to here and do this one. That's a flipped one, isn't it? So isn't it the same as moving it pi over 4, but put a negative in front because you're flipping it? So another one that would work is negative sine 2 x minus pi over 4.
You could put in negatives if you want to. There's infinite answers. You guys should know that by now. We're reaching the point in math where there's not just one answer anymore. There's more than one answer. Oh, look, they're fine. I think they're fine. I don't think you need to go see Surge and see what's happening with the ants. Do you? Oh, I see.
That's valid, yeah, valid.
Okay. We want to, yeah, let's do this one. Let's do two more. And then we'll stop it there. Let's do this one together. Okay. Okay. This is one where you may want to do the max plus min divide 2. Because the mid is not quite straightforward to see. What's the max? Plus the min. And that gives me 1/2. Or, and I actually find it easier to use decimals. I know we do a lot with fractions, we keep a lot in fraction form, but when we're doing these things, actually I find decimals a little bit easier to work with. Okay. What's the amplitude? Well, how far is it from 0.5? So here's the midline. How far is it from 0.5 to 3? 2.5, I thought I heard. B. So we got to find the period. We're looking at a cosine. So here's where a cosine starts and finishes. Notice the number of notches now. It's not starting and finishing in 4 notches. It's starting and finishing in 8. How much is 1 notch? Well, if 4 pi divide 4, that means 1 notch is pi. So that means 1 cycle is 8 pi's. So the period is 8 pi, which means it's 2 pi divided 8 pi, which simplifies to 1/4. I'll stick with decimal again. If you leave it at 1/4, remember, if you leave these things as 1/2 and 1/4, that's fine. But don't write this as 2.5. Don't write it as a mixed number. You have to write it as an improper fraction, 5/2. That's why I like to go to decimal. I just find it a little bit easier. So, what's H? Negative pi. Good. So therefore, our equation in this one is going to be y equals a 2.5 times cos, open bracket, b, which is 0.25, open parentheses, x minus h, so x minus negative pi becomes x plus pi, and then k at the end, which is 0.5. Okay. Notice these ones, you were asked specifically to find a sine or a cos. The last one that I would like you guys to try once again is this one. Notice it asks you write a sinusoidal function. It doesn't matter if you use sine or cos. You choose. So I'm kind of hoping that some of you are going to do a sine one, some of you are going to do a cosine one, and both are going to be correct. Okay? Because isn't sine just cosine shifted? And vice versa?
Huh? Huh? Ah. Yeah. You see it, don't you? No, don't squint. Because you were like, before you were like, yeah, never, I'm not going. Right? You got, you're awful. Yeah, it's pretty good. Live's recording that. Good thing I didn't say, Gilly, drink your beer. Only things that will be different is some of you may have sine and some of you may have cosine. Some of you may have different values for H. But K, A, and B will all be the same for everybody. So let's get those ones. What's K? K is -8 because it's the max plus the min divide 2, which is -8. A is 4. B is 2 pi divided by the period. Well, it doesn't matter whether you choose a sine or cosine cycle, you should get pi. So like, for example, if I look at this one, a cosine, 4 notches is pi, which means 1 notch is pi over 4, 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4. It doesn't matter what sine or cosine I choose, it's going to be the same. So it's 2 pi over pi, which is 2. Now, H all depends on whether you did sine or cosine and which one you decided to look at. So if I did cosine, and if I looked at this one, well, that's the same as shifting back 2 notches, or pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, shifting back 2 pi over 4, which is the same as negative pi over 2. So I would get y equals 4 cos 2, open parentheses, x plus pi over 2, close parentheses and brackets, minus 8. That's if I did this cosine one right here. If I did this cosine one, it would be x minus pi over 2. So all of this, and if this is minus, is also correct. If you did sine, so let's say I started sine here. Here's where sine starts and ends. So I would shift it pi over 4 to the right, correct? So therefore I would get y equals 4 sine bracket 2 x minus pi over 4, close parentheses and brackets, minus 8. That's another possible answer. And there are other answers with sine. And actually, you could do other answers if you decided to flip things. Okay? But why would you? I mean, I would probably avoid flipping in this case. Like, don't flip if you don't have to, because otherwise it makes it confusing. No. Yes. Yeah, you won't be asked for like a specific. Yes, right.